Congratulations, pioneers! Today, I have great news to share with you guys. What if I told you that right now, as you're watching this video, several countries are quietly exploring something that could change the entire global financial system forever? And no, I'm not talking about Bitcoin. I'm not talking about Ethereum. I'm talking about Pi Network. And what's happening outside mainstream headlines is bigger than most people realize. See, while everyone's been focused on the usual crypto headlines, something extraordinary has been unfolding. Government officials in multiple nations have been having conversations, policy-level discussions, about exploring how Pi Network could integrate into their national financial infrastructure, not just accepting it, not just regulating it, but actually examining how it could work as part of their economic future. Now, to be clear, no government has officially announced Pi as a national currency yet. What we're looking at here are signals, patterns, and real-world adoption trends that most people are ignoring. But these signals are significant, and they're pointing towards something that could reshape global finance. Hello again, Pi Network pioneers. I'm your host, Nathan. Before we dive deep into our video, let's greet and welcome my incredible pioneers from around the world. Whether you're watching from Nigeria, Papua New Guinea, United States, India, Philippines, Canada, Kenya, or anywhere else on this beautiful planet, I'm absolutely thrilled to share this incredible news with you today. Before we dive in, make sure to hit that subscribe button and tap the notification bell so you're always in the loop with the latest Pi Network updates. And don't forget to drop a comment saying Pi Network to the moon along with your country and flag. Let's fill the comments with pioneer pride and show the world how powerful and united our global community really is. So, let's dive right in. Here's the thing. The global financial system is cracking. Traditional currencies are struggling. Inflation is crushing people's savings, and nations, especially smaller ones, are desperately searching for alternatives that don't leave them dependent on Western banks and institutions. Pi Network has something no other cryptocurrency has: over 60 million users worldwide, a mobile-first approach that makes it accessible to anyone with a smartphone, and a community that's been building toward this moment for years. But the real question isn't whether this could happen. The question is, which country is going to make the first move, and what happens when they do? Because once that domino falls, everything changes. And there are signs that we're closer to that moment than you might think. Let's talk about why this is even possible right now, because timing is everything. The global economy is in a state of chaos. We've seen it over the past few years. Currency devaluations, banking crises, entire nations watching their money become worthless practically overnight. Countries like Lebanon, Venezuela, Zimbabwe have experienced currency collapses that devastated their populations. And even major economies aren't immune. We've watched the British pound crash, the euro struggle. Even the dollar, despite being the world's reserve currency, faces challenges that were unthinkable a decade ago. So nations are looking for alternatives. They're tired of being at the mercy of central banks that print money whenever they feel like it. They're tired of sanctions that can cut them off from the global financial system with the stroke of a pen. And they're especially tired of transaction fees and systems that favor the wealthy nations while keeping developing countries locked out. This is where cryptocurrencies were supposed to come in and save the day, right? Bitcoin was meant to be digital gold, a store of value, a way to escape government control. But here's the problem. Bitcoin requires massive energy consumption. The mining equipment costs thousands of dollars, and the network can only handle a handful of transactions per second. It's not practical for everyday use in a national economy. Ethereum and other cryptocurrencies have their own issues: high gas fees, complex technology that most regular people don't understand, and volatility that makes them impractical as a daily currency. But Pi Network was designed differently from the ground up. It's built to be mined on mobile phones, No expensive equipment needed, no massive electricity bills. Just download an app, verify your identity, and you're part of the network. This means anyone, anywhere can participate. A farmer in rural Kenya has the same access as a banker in London. And this accessibility is what makes Pi different. Because for a cryptocurrency to become a national currency, it needs to be something ordinary citizens can actually use. They need to be able to earn it, spend it, and trust it. Pi's user base of over 60 million people isn't just a number. It's a ready-made economy. It's millions of people who are already familiar with the system, already mining, already building the infrastructure. Now, traditional economists will tell you this is crazy. They'll say national currencies need to be controlled by governments. They need central banks to manage supply and interest rates. But here's what they're not telling you. That system is already breaking down, and some governments are starting to realize that maybe, just maybe, there's a better way. But which governments are actually taking this seriously? And what are they exploring behind the scenes? Because the answer to that question is going to shock you. Here's where things get really interesting. Because while the mainstream media has been ignoring Pi Network, some countries have been paying very close attention. Let's start with the signals coming out of certain African nations. Now, I have to be careful here because official confirmations are limited, but there have been multiple reports, testimonies from pioneers on the ground, and even some policy discussions that have surfaced in public forums. Countries in West Africa and East Africa have shown unusual interest in Pi Network. We're talking about government officials attending Pi meetups. We're talking about localized experiments where local merchants have been encouraged to accept Pi for goods and services. Why would these nations be interested? Think about it. Many African countries are still largely cash-based economies. Banking infrastructure is limited, millions of people don't have access to traditional financial services. But almost everyone has a mobile phone. Pi Network solves a massive problem for them. It provides financial inclusion without requiring expensive banking infrastructure. It allows citizens to participate in the global economy without needing a bank account that charges fees they can't afford. There are also reports coming from parts of Southeast Asia. Vietnam has one of the largest Pi Network communities in the world, and there have been discussions at local government levels about how cryptocurrencies could be integrated into regional economies. The Philippines, with its huge remittance market, where millions of overseas workers send money home to their families, those transaction fees eat up billions of dollars every year. Pi could eliminate those fees entirely. And then there's Latin America. Venezuela is the obvious example. Their currency became so worthless that people literally threw it in the streets. Millions of Venezuelans have turned to cryptocurrencies just to survive. Pi Network has a massive presence there. Local communities have formed, merchant ecosystems are developing, and while the national government hasn't made any official statements, the practical reality on the ground is that Pi is already functioning as an alternative currency in many areas. But here's what's really significant. It's not just about desperate nations looking for any solution. It's about the strategic advantages that Pi offers. For developing nations, exploring Pi means they could potentially bypass the entire Western financial system. They don't need approval from the International Monetary Fund. They don't need loans from the World Bank that come with strings attached. They don't need to worry about being cut off from SWIFT if they make a political decision that Western powers don't like. This is financial sovereignty, real sovereignty. And for nations that have spent decades being told what to do by richer, more powerful countries, that's incredibly appealing. Now, some of you might be thinking this all sounds too good to be true. And you're right to be skeptical, because making Pi a national currency isn't as simple as just deciding to do it. There are massive regulatory challenges, legal frameworks that need to be completely rewritten, international implications that could create serious problems. So how would a country actually do this? What would it take to make Pi not just accepted, but official? And are governments actually prepared to take those steps? Because what I'm about to tell you shows that some of them are further along in exploring this process than anyone realizes. All right, so let's get into the complicated part. because adopting a cryptocurrency as a national currency is legally and technically complex, but it's not impossible. In fact, we've already seen it happen. El Salvador made Bitcoin legal tender in 2021. Love it or hate it, they proved it could be done. They created a legal framework, they built the infrastructure, they integrated Bitcoin into their national economy alongside the US dollar. And while there have been challenges, the country is still operating. The financial system didn't collapse, life went on. But here's where Pi has an advantage over Bitcoin in this scenario. El Salvador's biggest challenge was getting citizens to actually use Bitcoin. The technology was confusing, the wallets were complicated, transaction fees were high, many citizens simply refused to participate. But Pi's mobile-first design and existing user base solves that problem. If a nation adopted Pi, millions of its citizens might already be familiar with how to use it. So what would the actual process look like? There are several models a country could follow. The first model is what I call the El Salvador approach. Make Pi legal tender alongside the existing currency. Citizens and businesses would be required by law to accept it as payment. The government would build infrastructure to support it. They might create government-backed wallets, set up exchange mechanisms, provide education programs. This is the most aggressive approach, but it sends a clear signal. It says, we're all in on this. The second model is more gradual, de facto acceptance. This is where the government doesn't officially endorse Pi as a currency, but they create a regulatory environment that allows it to flourish. They might establish it as a legal form of payment for certain services, allow taxes to be paid in Pi, remove barriers that prevent businesses from accepting it. This approach is less risky because the government can always pull back if things don't work out. The third model is the regulatory sandbox approach. This is where a government designates a specific zone, maybe a tech hub or a special economic zone, where Pi can be used freely as an experiment. They monitor what happens, they study the effects, and if it works, they gradually expand it to the broader economy. China actually did something similar with its digital yuan, testing it in specific cities before rolling it out nationally. There's also a fourth possibility that's particularly interesting: integration with central bank digital currencies. Many nations are developing their own CBDCs, digital versions of their national currencies. But most of these CBDCs are just digital versions of the same old system: centralized control, government surveillance, no real innovation. Some forward-thinking governments might realize they could integrate Pi into their CBDC framework, use Pi's technology and network effects while maintaining some level of oversight. It's a hybrid approach that could give them the best of both worlds. Now, all of these approaches require significant legal changes. Cryptocurrency laws would need to be rewritten, tax codes would need to be updated. How do you tax Pi transactions? How do you prevent money laundering? How do you protect consumers? These are legitimate questions that governments have to answer. But here's the thing. These aren't impossible questions, they're just new questions, and governments solve new problems all the time. When the internet became mainstream, governments figured out how to regulate it. When mobile banking emerged, they created frameworks for that too. This is no different. The nations most likely to move first are the ones with the least to lose and the most to gain. Small economies that are already struggling, nations that have been shut out of the global financial system, countries where the population is young, tech-savvy, and already using cryptocurrencies. And based on the patterns we're seeing, some of these nations are a lot closer to exploring these possibilities than most people think. Because once one nation officially adopts Pi, everything changes. The entire calculation shifts. And that brings us to perhaps the most important question of this entire video. What happens next? How does this spread? Because I can tell you right now, if one nation successfully integrates Pi into their economy, the domino effect that follows is going to reshape global finance in ways we can barely imagine. Imagine this scenario. A mid-sized nation, let's say somewhere in Africa or Southeast Asia, announces they're making Pi network legal tender. The announcement sends shockwaves through the global financial community. Mainstream media can't ignore it anymore. Suddenly, Pi is on every major news channel. What happens next? Here's where it gets wild. First, the immediate effect. Pi's value would likely surge. All those millions of pioneers who have been mining on their phones, waiting for mainnet,
Watching skeptics say Pi is worthless, suddenly they're holding something that a nation-state has validated. The market reacts. Exchanges that previously ignored Pi scramble to list it. Trading volume explodes. The network effect kicks into overdrive. But it's not just about price, it's about legitimacy. See, one of the biggest barriers to cryptocurrency adoption has always been trust. People don't trust what they don't understand. Governments have been hostile, banks have been dismissive. But when a government, even a small one, officially adopts a cryptocurrency, it changes the psychological equation. It says, this is real, this is legitimate, this is the future. Other nations start paying attention, especially neighboring countries with similar economic challenges. If country A successfully integrates Pi and their economy stabilizes, maybe even improves, country B starts thinking, why aren't we exploring this? Trade relations become easier. If two neighboring nations both use Pi, cross-border transactions become instantaneous and free. No exchange rate fluctuations, no banking delays, no transaction fees. That's a massive competitive advantage.
We could see the formation of what I'm calling a Pi economic bloc. Multiple nations that use Pi as their primary or secondary currency trading preferentially with each other, building economic alliances based on their shared financial infrastructure. This isn't crazy speculation. We've seen this happen before with traditional currencies. The Eurozone did exactly this. Multiple nations agreed to use a single currency to facilitate trade and economic cooperation. Pi could become the euro of the developing world, except better because it's decentralized and not controlled by any single government. And here's where it gets even more interesting. As adoption spreads at the national level, consumer and merchant adoption accelerates exponentially. Right now, one of the biggest challenges for Pi is getting merchants to accept it. But if governments are accepting it for tax payments, if banks are integrating it, if major corporations see that entire nations are using it, suddenly accepting Pi becomes a no-brainer. We could see major international companies, think Amazon, think Alibaba, think Walmart, start accepting Pi for transactions, not because they love cryptocurrency, but because millions of their customers are using it and they don't want to lose that business. The network effect is unstoppable at that point. More users means more merchants. More merchants means more utility. More utility means more users. It's a flywheel that keeps spinning faster and faster. And then there's the geopolitical dimension. Because let's be honest, if developing nations start successfully using Pi to bypass Western financial systems, the big powers are going to notice. The United States, the European Union, China, they can't ignore a parallel financial system that's operating outside their control. Some might see it as a threat and try to crack down. Others might realize they need to adapt or be left behind. We could see a fundamental restructuring of global financial power. The nations that adapt quickly, that integrate Pi or similar technologies, they'll thrive. The nations that try to maintain the old system through force and regulation, they might find themselves increasingly isolated. This is the future we're potentially looking at, a world where financial power is decentralized, where small nations have the same access to global markets as large ones, where individuals control their own wealth without needing permission from banks or governments. It sounds utopian, maybe it is, but the pieces are already moving into place. The question isn't if this will happen, the question is when. And more importantly, are you going to be ready when it does? Because this shift, when it comes, is going to create opportunities unlike anything we've seen in our lifetimes, but only for people who understand what's happening and position themselves accordingly. So, what should you actually do about this? Let's bring this back to you, because all of this analysis, all of these predictions, they don't mean anything if you're not prepared to act on them. If you're not already part of the Pi network, now is the time to get involved. Download the app, complete your KYC verification, start mining. Yes, it only takes a few seconds a day, but those small actions now could position you at the forefront of a financial revolution. Think about the people who mined Bitcoin back in 2010 when everyone thought it was worthless. Think about how they feel now. Pi is at that same inflection point. But it's not just about mining, it's about participating in the ecosystem. If you're a business owner, start accepting Pi. Get ahead of the curve. Be the merchant that people remember was there from the beginning. If you're a developer, build applications on the Pi platform. Create the tools and services that this new economy is going to need. If you're just a regular person trying to navigate an uncertain financial future, having a diversified approach to wealth that includes decentralized currencies isn't crazy, it's prudent. Educate yourself. Don't just take my word for any of this. Do your own research. Understand how Pi works. Understand the technology. Understand the economics. Join Pi communities online. Connect with other pioneers. Share knowledge. Build networks. Because if and when this transition happens, the people who are informed, who are connected, who are active in the community, those are the people who are going to benefit most. Stay informed about regulatory developments. Watch what governments are doing, not just the big powers, but the smaller nations that might be the early adopters. Follow cryptocurrency news with a critical eye. Understand the broader trends in finance and technology that are making this shift possible. And perhaps most importantly, think long-term. This isn't a get-rich-quick scheme. This is about being part of a fundamental transformation in how human beings exchange value. Pi Network's vision from the beginning has been to create a truly global, accessible currency, a currency that works for everyone, not just the wealthy, not just people in developed nations, not just the technologically sophisticated, everyone. That vision is closer to reality than most people understand. The infrastructure is being built, the community is growing, the technology is maturing, and now, potentially, governments are exploring how to validate it on a national scale. We are living through a historic moment. Future generations will look back at this time and wonder what it was like to witness the birth of a new financial system, and you have the opportunity to not just witness it, but to be part of it. The old financial system is dying. Not tomorrow, not next week, but the cracks are showing. The institutions that have controlled global finance for centuries are losing their grip, and what replaces them will be determined by the choices we make now, by the technologies we adopt, by the communities we build, by the values we uphold. Pi Network represents more than just a new currency. It represents a new way of thinking about value, about trust, about cooperation. It represents the possibility that maybe, just maybe, we can build something better than what came before, something more fair, something more inclusive, something more human. So here's my final message to you. Don't sleep on this. Don't dismiss it because it sounds too ambitious or too idealistic. Don't let skepticism or fear keep you from being part of something extraordinary. Because whether you believe it or not, whether you participate or not, this shift is coming. The only question is whether you'll be ready for it. The future of money is being written right now, and you have a chance to be part of that story. So what are you waiting for? The time to act is now.